Welcome into the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, joined by my co-host Dylan Barnas. We are back. The White Sox are still playing right now, so I'm still sort of watching the White Sox game in the background here. But we are back with another episode as we near the trade deadline. We did draft coverage last week. A lot of fun getting all that going. We're going to have, updated top 30 coming here soon after the draft. A lot of fun stuff coming up. But for now, actually, I guess the White Sox game just ended. Never mind. I was like, I was checking it, but it's over. So I hope you're joining us for people that are joining us
Yeah,
live.
perfect timing.
It's good timing. Finish up watching the White Sox lose their first game in a week, but still a very
Hey, we'll
competitive
take
game
it.
against the Rays. Colson Montgomery's first big league homer, good competition. They're playing a tight game. It's been a pretty encouraging start to the post All-Star break. So, how you feeling about everything, Dylan? How we doing?
It's been good. I had a lot of fun watching the White Sox over the weekend and yesterday, and even today, dude. Like Colson Montgomery is just like I think it was like a 10 pitch at bat that he had against Rasmussen, and I want to say the fourth inning, his last inning of work, and then he turns around and in his next at bat puts a ball 360 feet down the right field line for his first big league homer, and he just continues to string together good at bats, and there's been less and less times where I feel like I'm watching him and I'm like, yeah, he's overmatched right now. Like, I know for a fact that he's not going to do something productive. Like, there are a lot of times where he's putting together good at bats. Even if it ends in a strikeout, he's still going up there, fouling off a couple pitches, running the pitcher's pitch count up, and it ends up being a productive at bat. So I'm seeing a
Yeah.
lot of good things.
Yeah, a lot of positives from Colson, honestly, out of the gate, and just from the team in general. These are competitive games; they're fun. I don't know if you saw that the White Sox that weird stat. I think you posted. Yes, out on your Instagram. It was
Mm-hmm.
the cool like first 4 games out of the
Yeah.
break, first team to ever win all 4 games out of the break by more than 5 runs or some weird
Yep.
random whatever. But
Hey,
like, it's cool, man. We'll take it. I
MLB
mean,
history.
it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun games. It's a fun team. They're playing strong. I still will never understand the refusal to play Caro and Teal in the same
Yeah.
games, but aside from that, they're playing pretty good ball, and really can't complain about that. And ultimately, Luis sat today. Everybody started freaking out on Hug Watch and
Yeah.
everything. It turns out it was just a rest day. I get each side of it. I get the whole, keep him healthy. He looked good for the last 4 days. Like everything that we're hearing and everything that I've heard is that they're still going to get something for Luis Robert. It's not going to
Right.
be what you would have gotten a year and a half ago. It's not going to be what you would have gotten in 2020 after 2023. Like, yes, like it's going to be a disappointing package considering his name. Can it still be a piece or two of serious value? I think so, man. I really do. So we're going to get to that in the second half of the episode. We're going to talk basically all the trade chips the White Sox have, who the teams that could possibly trade for them. We'll mention a couple prospects on the other side of people who we might be targeting from our view of prospects that would be of interest to the White Sox in any given trade. It's not like the crochet thing, right? Like you're not
Right.
making trade packages that are built around the third, fourth, and sixth best prospect in a system. Like that's just not
Yeah.
where the White Sox are. That's not what the assets are. Like if they were to, make a shocking move, okay, maybe there's a bigger prospect involved. Like most of these assets involved are going to be smaller type of trades. They're going to be more, either a AAA guy who hasn't gotten playing time and looks like he could be a decent piece, or a complex single A guy who has upside but hasn't proven anything yet. It's those types of players the White Sox are going to be getting. I'm hoping it's some really solid pieces that I like. I think there's also a chance we're going to get some trade returns in these deals that are players we might not even be too familiar with, honestly.
Right. And like you said, it's so hard to predict return package for a relief pitcher. Like I'm not gonna predict
Yeah,
Brandon Eisert for a team's 58th best prospect. Like
it's just yeah.
it could be anybody. So like it's tough for the packages that we've like sort of created. We've only really put like a couple names that we would be targeting in return, but we've got a list of about 8 or 9 names that the White Sox could be shipping out here in the next week or so. That
And what it comes down to, right, man, is like other than Luis Robert, right? Anything you get for any other player that we're going to talk
right,
about is essentially
right,
house money, right? You're playing
yeah,
with house money. Luis Robert, yes, you're going to be disappointed that you're not getting the elite package, right? Like I get it, but I also just beyond him, I think the rest of the guys you're looking at in this list, if you get anything, if you get a piece that's projectable, if you get the new 25th best prospect in the White Sox system, like cool, right? Like, and I think
right,
you're going to get a little
yeah.
more than that for at least for the Taukman and the Hauser level. Beyond that level, then it's a bunch of flyers, really. But like whatever you get for a lot of these players, aside from Robert, is a net positive for what the value
Yeah.
of these players was, either getting signed to a 1 year deal or being kind of guys that don't fit into the fold anymore for the White Sox, right? So it's a good situation to be in. Before we get to a couple top performers and then get into these mock trades, I do want to quickly mention the draft right now as a follow up because we saw the official
Right.
signing announcements for the 3 prep picks, which was first rounder Billy Carlson, second rounder Jaden Fauske, and fourth rounder Landon Hodge. The 3 prep picks are over $1 million over slot. Billy Carlson gets
Yeah.
at slot value, which we thought he'd be a little bit under, but at the same time, like the Sox got their guy. I'm not complaining about getting your guy and paying for him at slot like that. If that's the guy you wanted at 10 and you get him at 10 for slot value, like cool. I'm not going to complain about that. And then you go to a Fauske who stood strong at 3 million. He gets 800 over slot, and then Landon Hodge who ends up getting about 350 or so over slot. So you're at over 1.1 million over slot right now without anybody else in the pre 10 rounds being officially signed yet, and we're expecting 11th rounder Matthew Botton to be an over slot guy as well. So going to be interesting to see how that works. I do want to answer one question here from our guy in the chat. The interesting thing, so for those who don't know, there is basically a contingency bonus is what it's called in the MLB draft, where it's a $2,500 bonus that teams can either include in the initial signing bonus or they can defer it and pay it later, essentially. So the players are going to get that. So when you see these deals get reported for exactly
Right.
$2,500 under whatever, Fauski's was $2,500 under 3 million. Carlson's was $2,500 under the slot. Basically, that's the tip off that the White Sox are in a tight crunch with money this year in the draft, and that players are still going to get that 2,500 eventually, but it's basically being used from a different pool to be able to save that little small incremental amount of money for the bonus pool. They'll still get that money. It's just going to be a later form of it, and it allows the White Sox that that 7,500 that they save between those 3 players, holding on the contingency bonus for now. The player will get that later, but it will allow that more money for the White Sox bonus pool. It's going to get interesting to see because clearly the White Sox utilized all the money they possibly could to make sure they got these 3 prep guys and they picked these guys, and this draft at the end of the day is going to hedge pretty heavily on these 3 high schoolers.
Yeah, and I think James Fox put out something. It was like the White Sox have spent like 10.1 million, I want to say, of their. I think you can spend up to
10.3 of 12.7.
Yeah, 12.7 million. So looking at some guys who like predicting what their signing bonuses will be, it's gonna be pretty tight. I'm gonna be honest, but
for sure.
The senior signs in rounds 6, 8, 9, and 10, I want to say, those guys are gonna get like maybe $50,000 if that. So like you're gonna be able to shave into that million or so over slot that you are right now. But then the Boughton being probably like 300,000 over slot because his slot is only $150,000. So it's gonna be weird, but I think that they're gonna be able to get everybody to sign and not have to pay any taxes on anything over that 5%.
I think they'll stay within. I think it'll be tight for sure. Somebody asked about Kyle Lodis. My guess on Lodis is that it's going to be basically just him and Hodge swapping because Lodis is a college guy. He was projected in that 3rd to 4th round range. Hodge was, a lower ranked player, but being the prep guy, being an LSU commit, right? That takes more money to sign. So I think they essentially are flipping the 3rd and 4th rounder in terms of value. I think Lodis will be around an 800K type of guy, which is more like, the beginning of the late 3rd round, early 4th round money instead of early 3rd. So to answer that question, I think that's where he goes there. But I do think that there is going to be a little bit of a crunch, but I think they're going to get it done. Yeah. I think that at the end of the day, like they got their targets, and the 1st and 2nd pick in the draft were the exact targets the White Sox had from everything we've heard. Like they got their guy at both the 1st and 2nd round picks. You make that work. You make that work financially. Yeah. You can find ways to make it work. If you get your 2 guys that you really believe in the upside of, and they very much believe in Jaden Fauske and Billy Carlson, you find a way to make it work, and they're going to make it work. So we'll get all those signings here in the next handful of days. I know most of the draft class guys actually got out to Arizona today, so they're starting minicamp later this week, which is going to be exciting for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to see a lot of the high school players get their first work in Arizona, and a lot of the advanced older college guys. They shouldn't be in Arizona for more than a week or so, and then they're going to get shipped off to an affiliate, probably Kannapolis. You might see a few go to.
I think Lodis might go to Winston. Honestly.
That's what we were saying, but I think he's probably the only one that's ready to go right away.
Maybe one of the bullpen arms, 1 or 2 of the bullpen arms could. But.
Yeah. But like it's going to be a lot of new faces in Kannapolis, and we're going to see a lot of the Kannapolis guys get promoted, which is going to be fun to see. So a lot of movement in the system over the next couple weeks, and especially with the draft and with the trade returns coming over. I assume that they're going to be a lot of low minors guys.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be exciting to see where all those guys go. Obviously, we'll keep you updated here at Future Sox. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I did a Jaden Fauske interview that came out yesterday.
Yep.
Awesome to talk to him. He really good dude and really just a true competitor at that age, and someone I think that the mindset is going to take him a long way in addition to the talent. We're going to have more interviews coming up. I've got Landon Hodge coming up at some point in the next week. Kyle Odis as well, hopefully. So we're going to have a handful of interviews here, and it's going to be cool as we keep covering this draft class. Heading into kind of just a brief look at the minors before we get into mock trades, because that's the main focal point today. A couple guys, we'll go down the levels that has been pretty solid overall. Coming out of the break, right? It's always good to see if guys kind of take a step forward, right? And coming out of the All-Star break, it's a time where players can reset a little bit, they can have a little bit of time, and then sometimes guys really get going here in the second half, and that can lead to a promotion or even a big league chance in September call-ups. If for guys in AAA, for guys in AA, even, right? If you come out of the break and you really show a clear step in your progress in July and August, right? That can lead to a bump there towards the end of the season. So starting in Charlotte, anybody that stick out to you, Dylan, in the last, these few games, or even just had a little bit before break too?
Brian Ramos was the minor league baseball or I think it was the AAA or he was either AAA or minor league baseball as a whole third baseman of the week last week. I haven't looked at his stats but off the top of my head, I know he hit at least one homer. I've seen video of it, but I'm assuming had a good week. I don't know what the stats are.
He went 5 for 12, 3 extra base hits in 3 games, 2 walks as well for Ramos. So nice to see him in his first 3 games back just break a little bit. And I got somebody. I was on a different show earlier this week, and someone asked me, is Ramos still a part of the future? And it's hard to gauge because I think the organization is definitely stronger, in the infield side of things than in the outfield side of things right now, for sure. And that makes it, positionally a little bit tricky to kind of figure out what that looks like. But I do think that Ramos can still be a piece. I think that Ramos, the cool thing with him is he's a third baseman, right? But I think you could have him work at some first. He's worked at second in the past, right? So I think with Ramos, I would love for him to carve at least a platoon role. Maybe it's a platoon against lefties, right? Maybe it's a weak side platoon. If Colson struggles a little against lefties at one point, or if you see kind of Mydroth back up a little bit, maybe Ramos starts against left-handed pitching. He's always matched left-handed pitching, so at the very least, I think he could be a weak side platoon guy, which if he can be a bench hitter, a weak side platoon starter, I'm okay with that. And I still believe there's some tools there for Brian Ramos. It just hasn't come together quite yet this season. And he's dealt with some injuries too, but I do still think he can be at least a bench piece in the future, potentially.
Yeah, he's always been a streaky hitter. We've seen those streaks come and go. We saw a couple of weeks in Chicago last year where he looked like he was starting to carve out a role in the everyday future of the White Sox. Sadly, it didn't really continue as he would hoped, and he has scuffled a lot this year. Granted, some of that was due to injury, like you said, but it's good to see him start to get going because I think he's still only 23, 24.
Yeah, he's 23 years old, man.
It's not so there's still a lot of time
around for many years. He came up last year at 22, and he still could easily be a big league piece for sure. So I'm excited to see Ramos hopefully get hot, and then maybe it's a September call, man. Depending on the deadline, right? There should be some at bats for him there in September, possibly.
Yeah, if Josh Rojas gets traded, I don't know why anybody would want to trade for Josh Rojas.
Let's find this comment I saw earlier.
Yeah, DFA Josh Rojas, actually. I would support that more than a trade. But, if infield spots open up, I could easily see Brian Ramos being the first one up because, he's on the 40-man already. I think he might be the only infielder in Charlotte on the 40-man. I'm not sure. But there's some spots that could open up. You might even see him play the outfield. I know that there were talks of that in spring training about him getting some reps in left field. Am not the biggest supporter of that because I feel like corner infielders
great in the past.
But, corner infielders playing the outfield position is not exactly it has not been good for the White Sox. But if they think he's athletic enough, more than Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets, which I probably think he is, but if they think he's athletic enough to hold his own out there, I could see that. I could see that happening, especially if a surprise Andrew Benintendi trade happens, which I doubt that happens, but
unlikely. But
you never know.
Yeah. Some other guys in Charlotte, just briefly going through. Yoendris Gomez has been sneaky, really
Yeah.
good all season in Charlotte. This is a guy who's 25 years old and was a product of both the Yankees and Dodgers farm systems at one point in his early coming. He struggled at the big league level when he got a couple appearances here and there, but he really hasn't gotten a real shot. He's put up a 2.3 ERA in Charlotte this season and continues to have good starts. He's coming off of a 4 inning shutout start, his first game back from the break. So Gomez is someone who I think definitely can at least fill a bullpen role post deadline when you clear out some of these veterans. A couple other Jesse Schultens with his best start on rehab since getting back, so that was good to see from him. Obviously a very short amount of games here. We're talking about a 4 game span here, but going down to Birmingham. Sam Antonacci makes his way to Birmingham, man, and Sam
Yay.
Antonacci does what Sam Antonacci does, and
Yep.
I was lucky enough to break that one, which was cool, and he just, I mean, the dude just hits wherever he goes. He
Yeah.
just hits. He takes good at bats. He doesn't strike out. He just does his thing, man, and he keeps doing his thing. And in his first 3 games in Charlotte or in Birmingham, pardon me, 3 hits, another 2 walks, a stolen base, only 1 strikeout in those games. It's more of the same, honestly. It's more of the same from Antonacci. And I said this to you when we were just talking about it a little bit. I was like, oh, and there we go. I just checked the Birmingham box score, and Sam Antonacci is 2 for 3 and just doubled. It's
Shocker.
just the same thing over and over. I don't get why he's not leading off for Birmingham, to be
Yeah.
honest. I get the Rikun thing because he walks a lot and you get some of that consistency at the top of the order. But like for me, like Antonacci, like I see more future value there with him than pretty much anybody else in that Birmingham lineup. Honestly,
Yeah.
that might be me being a little bit bullish on him. I get there's some guys probably still ahead of the pecking order in front of him in the lineup, but like I do think that Antonacci, he looks the same in Birmingham so far. Obviously, 4 games, right? But like, he
Right.
doesn't look like he's at all overwhelmed by Birmingham after what is right? He said for a 5th round pick, he's probably got to be one of the first guys of
Yeah.
that section of the draft to be in Double A already from last year's draft, right? So
Hmm.
it's not to be unnoticed there that he is looking really good and is already in Double A as a guy who was drafted last year after playing only 1 year of D1 baseball too. So definitely a guy that I've been on for a while. We've both been on for a while, and we can keep being excited about. We just got to mention in the comment, Wilfred Veras has had a really strong weekend. Actually, 5 hits in the
Yep.
first 3 games this past weekend. Nice to see him heat up a little there as well. A couple other guys go to Matt Hogan rejoins Birmingham. Some other guys there doing their thing. Interesting thing with the Birmingham pitching staff, it's the pitching staff pretty much throughout the minor leagues, which is interesting. A lot of innings limiting. I was
Yeah.
ready to see Tanner McDougal shove, and then he gets pulled after the 3rd inning in 29 pitches. And then, we see Hagen go another 3 inning spurt where he still couldn't quite find the zone. Tyler Schweitzer's back in Birmingham. He had a great start, but only 3 innings as well. Interesting to see kind of the energy here. Tyler Schweitzer's out of the pen, but interesting to see kind of this continual innings limit thing going on in the minors right now. Where I get it, right out of All-Star break, it's probably just part of coming right off the break and trying to ease in, but it is interesting that there's some serious limiting of innings going on.
Yeah, and with guys like Tyler Schweitzer, like he's an advanced college arm. Like I feel like he doesn't
Yeah.
need to be limited on his innings, on
And
his
he threw a
workload.
lot last year. It's not like
Exactly.
he didn't throw a lot like in
Exactly.
the past, so
So he's no stranger to pitching 6 innings every week for an entire season. So that one I feel like is the biggest question mark for me. But then like Hagen and Tanner, those guys have dealt with injury in the past, and they're
yeah.
coming off of their, I don't want to say their, especially with Tanner, he was coming off of his worst season, and then Hagen was college draft pick. He was gonna get a slow start into his professional career. But Tanner, I really think that he is, or that the organization is slow tracking him for a September call up, because
It sure seems that way.
yeah, because when you're limiting a guy who has a sub 2 ERA in Birmingham to 3 innings per start, like something is going on there, because they're not going to limit his innings if he was just going to waste away in Birmingham
Sure.
the entire year. Because then if he was there the entire year, you just shut him down at the end of the year and say, all right, it's
Right.
it's 4 weeks before the season is done, but you've hit your innings cap, and we're going to shut you down and make sure that you don't overexert yourself, lose any of that good momentum that you've built this year. So I think that we're going to see Tanner McDougal, maybe not like the day after the All-Star break, but or the day after the trade deadline.
Yeah.
It's probably September, but it could be a bullpen role. If there's a surprise Davis Martin, Jonathan Cain, and Sean Burke trade, maybe out of the rotation. I doubt it, but I think we're going to see some of these advanced arms start to get bumped up.
Yeah, I think so, man. I do think that's going to start to happen here. I think McDougal's going to come out of the pen in September, and I think it's going to be pretty cool to see. It's another guy who just has electric stuff, and I think that, considering he's Rule 5 eligible in the winter, he's going to have to go on the 40 man
Right.
anyway. So I think the White Sox add him to the 40 man. He debuts out of the bullpen for a handful of innings in September, and he goes into next year with completely fully in the mix of a rotation spot, for the 2026 White Sox. And same thing with if Noah Schultz can get back in a groove and get healthy here. He's going through a tiny little knock up here, but nothing crazy there for Schultz. But I think there's a lot of young guys that are going to be competing for the rotation next year, and it's going to breed competition, and that's a good thing to have going into next season for sure.
Yeah, and then you got guys coming off of injury like Mason Adams and Drew Thorpe, where those
Right.
guys coming into the year were, I don't want to say penciled in to the White Sox bullpen or White
Yeah.
Sox rotation. I know
No, for
Thorpe
sure.
was. Adams would have been fighting for a spot, and I think he honestly would have won the spot out
Yeah,
of
I
spring
agree.
training just because of how
Or at least
how
soon
good Mason
after,
Adams is.
the start of the
Exactly,
year. Yeah.
exactly. There
Yeah.
wouldn't have been a Savali trade, Adrian Hauser
Sure.
signing. Like he would have been the first guy up.
Right. Exactly. Before we move on to Winston, you want to tell me why Zach Franklin's in Birmingham still? Because I'm not sure.
No clue. No
I'm
clue.
not sure.
Absolutely no
Yeah,
clue.
yeah, I'm with you, Drake. I think 100% that Zach Franklin should not only not be in Birmingham, but like if you want to send him to Charlotte for a little, sure, but like I'd be perfectly fine with a guy like Zach Franklin, his archetype, going straight into Chicago's bullpen,
Yeah.
after the deadline or at least in September, if not after the deadline. So I think he should debut this year. I don't see why not, but we'll
Yeah,
see what
I
happens
want
there.
to see his fastball just like shape because like
Yeah,
everything I've read about it and
it's
seen,
stupid.
it's nutty, and I just want to
Yeah,
see some metrics on it to know
yeah.
how good it actually is.
Yeah, I'm curious for sure. Heading to Winston, pretty solid start to the second half for Braden Montgomery here. 3 hits or 4 hits over the weekend in 3 games. 2 of those being doubles, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. Nice to see Braden kind of get in a groove there. And then today, I believe he had another good game actually. So that makes it. The stats haven't updated on MLB, but yeah, another 2 walks and a hit today. So that makes it 5 hits and 4 walks in his first 4 games out of the break. So
Not
really
bad.
nice to see Braden start hot here after a lot of ups and downs for the past 2 months. A lot of good for sure, but
Yeah.
also some struggles at times in Winston-Salem. So seeing him start the break, just looking hot, looking comfortable, is good to see for sure.
Yeah, and I think that there hasn't been anything from Braden Montgomery this year that I wasn't expecting. I knew like I was expecting him to
Right.
crush it out of the gate against low A pitching and then get promoted, which he did, and then he scuffled a bit once he got to Winston Salem, and now he's adjusting back, and I'm not saying a Birmingham promotion is tomorrow, but after we see some of the draft picks get up. I think that he spends like the last 2-3 weeks in Birmingham if there's a roster crunch in Winston Salem.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. Very interesting little thing that I'm looking at the Birmingham box score today, which I am curious about. Guess who came in for the close today for Winston-Salem? Pardon, not
Hmm.
Birmingham, Winston-Salem.
Winston Salem.
Yeah,
I'm
pretty
not
interesting here.
sure.
He hasn't made a start in 2 weeks. He was just promoted and then hadn't pitched in the last week and a half. Seth Keener closed out the game today for
Ooh.
Winston-Salem.
Okay. Okay.
We've been talking about this one.
Yeah.
I think I will say this for those Seth Keener, right, a third round pick, so you want to get that a good try as a starter, similar to that Peyton Polite conversation when he was coming up a couple years ago. I think Seth Keener could be a really nasty bullpen arm. He
Yeah.
was a bullpen arm in college, and he was a very good one at times.
Hmm.
Yeah, you want to try those guys as a starter, but given the level of starting depth in the organization now compared to 2 years ago when Keener was drafted,
Hmm.
I kind of like this. I'm kind of here for this personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting little note there.
Like
Yeah,
we've been saying, like ever since the pitching depth has been established, some of these guys are going to end up shifting to the bullpen, and it's not because of talent. Like they can't perform as starters, and Keener has scuffled as a starter, no doubt about that. So
yeah.
there, with him, it kind of makes sense that he was shifted into a bullpen role. But
Well,
like
we'll see if that lasts. That could be an innings
exactly,
thing, but interesting to see that
exactly.
it wasn't only out of the pen, it was out of the pen in the ninth inning, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
So
Yeah,
some of these guys are going to get moved to the bullpen, and not because of that they can't be a starter down the road. They
right,
absolutely could be, but it's just because there's so much good starting pitching above them that if they want to get innings and move up the levels, they're going to have to pitch out of the bullpen because there's
right.
simply no room in the rotation for them.
Yeah, exactly. Quick question here. We'll get to this a little later, but I do want to answer this question just because we got it coming in
Yeah.
here. How many 2025 draft picks make the Future Sox top 30? It's 4 for sure. I think it's definitely the top 4 guys, and then from there it's a little bit of a toss up. I think for me, it might just be those four. If there was a fifth, it would probably be Colby Shelton as the fifth, I think. Is that fair to say?
I was gonna give a little bit of love to Gabe Davis just because of
Potentially.
how much just raw stuff he has, but I think Colby Shelton is probably the like 32 or 33 for me right now. That could
Yeah.
change, but
They're both in that back edge, but definitely the top
yeah,
four, right? Yeah.
yeah, I think 4 is a pretty safe bet right now. Maybe 5, maybe.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. Not a ton else to talk in Winston here. I'm trying to look through and just see. I mean, Christian Opper, another guy that was limited on his innings and his first start back, but looked solid. Another 4 strikeouts across 3 innings for him.
Well, didn't it
Generally
get delayed
speaking,
by rain
just
too?
yeah, it was a whole that was a weird. There was a bunch of rain out situation, I think, for Winston's first series back, which got a little messed up. But that's all I got in Winston. Heading down to Kannapolis because I want to get into these trades. We're already 25 minutes in. We got to talk about
Oh
trades,
yeah,
man. So heading, talking a little bit in Kannapolis. The headline is George Walkow for
yep,
sure. George was 7 hits in his first 4 games, and he had one of those. I think one game that was 4 hits, right? I think one game this
I
weekend where he had
think.
a 4-hit game, including a homer. So nice to see Walkow come out of the break a little bit hot today. He had a rougher game. Went over 4 today, but with 3 really strong games to start the break over the weekend, which is great to see. Would love to see a big second half out of him and just cement himself, kind of going, still in that pedigree going into next year if he can really put together a nice strong second half here. Rony Hernandez with a nice start to the second half here. Another guy to mention there. In the pitching side, Justin Sinibaldi had a really good start. Luis Reyes also had a really good start coming out of the break. So nice to see kind of just everybody getting out of the break hot. It's been a pretty good start in these first 4 games for the organization.
Yeah, and
All
it's
things
really
considered,
nice. It's really nice to see George Walkout just healthy. Like he
yeah.
had strep and the flu at the same time, and it just absolutely cratered his momentum. He was on a little bit of a hot streak in June, and then got sick, and then went on a 3 for 48 skid over like 2.5 weeks. So
Yeah.
it's just nice to see him healthy and continuing to do what we saw from him earlier on in the year. But hopefully, like you said, this continues throughout the rest of the season, and we start to see some more stat line or like box score stuffing from Walkout. Because I was talking to some people about this like just the other day. If you told me preseason that George Walkout would have a strikeout rate hovering around 25% on the year, I would have thought that he
Yeah.
was
Right.
killing the baseball and
Right. For
was
sure.
probably already up in Winston-Salem. So
Yeah.
it's just very weird because there are things that he has done better this year, but there are also things that he's done worse. So if he can just sort of find the middle ground between those two, I think that he's gonna start his rise through the system in 2026.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, man. I'm totally with you. Yeah, somebody mentioned Marcelo Acala was added to the top 30 on Pipeline. Pipeline's decision making on in terms of complex
Okay.
guys is always a little bit questionable,
Yeah.
but he has been good. 820 OPS this season in the Arizona Complex League, and then Nick McLean, who was in Kannapolis, does seem like he's going to be out for the year on the
Yeah.
60 man. It sounds like he's going to be out for the season, so we'll see him back in action next year. Same thing with Casey Sauke. Unfortunate to see third and fourth rounders from last season basically not play this year and not be healthy at all this season. So we'll see what has up with them in the offseason heading into next year. That's all I got on that. I'm ready to talk trades, man, because it's
Yep.
time. I've been texting back and forth with people about Luis trades, about this and that. Should we just start with the big fish and just jump into Luis
Yeah.
Robert?
Yeah. This is what the people came here for. So
So Luis Robert, tricky market. We get
yeah.
it. We all understand the market's complicated. He is a high level center field defender. He's been mashing lefties, even with a poor season on the books for him. He still has been a lefty masher throughout the season. This is where it comes down to. I know somebody just asked, right? Is it a bad idea to keep Robert? Risk a second half, trade him in the offseason? Like I I personally am on the side of just cutting bait and just saying you get what you
Yes.
get this off this deadline. Realistically, I don't know if a team is trading for him knowing it's $20 million option next year, given the season he's had. He'd have to really tear it up in the second half and stay healthy. Right now, if he can do another week of what he's done the past handful of days, and at the very worst, he's a weak side platoon player, right? Because a contending team knows the risk they're taking. But if you can guarantee a strong defensive center fielder who will hit lefties well, you're going to get something still for him.
Yeah.
And you're going to get something still for him, especially if he does what he did this weekend for another week.
Yeah, but the thing that I have been like sort of racking my brain around
Yeah.
is the outfield market this year is Kyle Tucker and then pretty much nobody else. Like
That's
you
it.
could make a case for Luis Robert being the second best outfielder that would hit the open market this year if his option does get declined. So for
Yeah.
me, I could very easily see a team gambling on that 20 million and just being like, all right, there was something there 2 seasons ago, and if he has a strong second, if he has a strong last couple months for that team, they could be like, all right, we found something here. We're not going to let him go and test the open market and probably sign with a new team because if you decline the options, he's not exactly going to be inclined to stay with that team that declined the
Yeah,
option.
sure.
So I genuinely think that if he has a hot second half of the season, you could see that option get picked up. I don't think that's likely though. I think he's
Right.
viewed as a rental, but I'm not saying it's going to happen. Just saying
But
it's a
if you
possibility.
it is possible, but if you're viewing him as a rental on the market, right? What does that market look like? Because you've got to be, in my opinion, and we talked about this before recording, right? Like, I think that a team trading for him wants to be playing him in center field because that's
Yeah,
where the value is coming from at the very least, right? If he doesn't hit and he still is kind of in this what he's been doing all season at the plate, you have a defensive player in center field and a guy who's going to steal some bags and a guy who will play a good center field for you if you need him in the playoff time, right? That's what it comes down to. So like I don't think that some teams that might on paper be a fit for an outfield bat are worth trading for him when they don't have a spot in center field, right? So the Padres, for example, are one team that comes to mind. Like they need an outfielder. We're going to talk about them later because I think there's some other players that could fit really well with the Padres. I don't see them trading for Luis Robert when they have Jackson Merrill in center field and when Luis Robert would be a left fielder at that price with that much risk offensively. I think the teams that trade for him have to be a clear contender, and B, a team that can afford to have the risk of him only being a platoon bat, right? And C, a team that needs a center fielder, right? So it's a
right.
multifaceted conversation. It's complicated to figure out who actually is a fit for him. I think we're both in agreement there's two clear teams. And beyond those two, we could get shocked, right? For all we know, that the Brewers could be like, screw it, we're actually going to spend some money for
Right.
once. And
Yeah.
but like, I don't expect that to happen. There's two teams that really make sense for Luis Robert, right?
Yes, it's the Phillies and the Mets. Two division rivals. They're both going head to head for the top of the NL East right now. And both of those teams have expressed interest in Luis Robert in the past, and both of them could really use a right-handed hitting good defender out in center field. The Phillies have basically all but said that they are looking for a Luis Robert type at the deadline. They wanted
Yep.
a right-handed hitting center fielder. So if that doesn't connect them to Luis Robert, I don't know what will. But like you said with the Padres, it's AJ Preller. He could offer something that Chris Getz didn't even think was possible, and he could just take it and ride off into the sunset. So I'm not ruling the Padres out in any trade discussion ever, just because of how ridiculous AJ Preller is with throwing prospects seemingly everywhere. So I do think it's the Phillies or the Mets, though.
I think those two make the most sense, and I think they're two teams that are like they're going to be all in. Like those teams
Yeah,
are going to go for it. Like the National League is such a crazy situation because you've got the Phillies, the
yeah,
Mets, the Cubs, and the Dodgers who are all in. Like none of
yeah.
those teams are going to pull bullets in terms of what they need to do to make their team better. I think you're going to see a really interesting. I mean, the Phillies just gave freaking Dave Robertson a $16 million
Right,
prorated contract after he hasn't pitched in for 3 months and he's been sitting on the market because, I think they would be, the type of team where like they'd rather just eat the money and spend to get
right,
a bullpen pitcher like that so then they can allocate some prospect resources towards getting a big bat, right? So Jaron Duran is another one that I think both the Mets and Phillies will be after. So I think both those teams would prefer Jaron Duran to a Luis Robert. But if the price is too high for a Jaron Duran or if one of them gets beat by the other one, then you can pivot to a Luis Robert where you don't have to trade a top asset like an Andrew Painter and the Mets wouldn't have to trade a Jonah Tong, right? Like there's going to be this interesting dynamic where you don't need to trade an elite asset, but you got to give something still to get a guy who plugs into center field for you immediately. For the Mets, right? It's a funny thing because Jeff McNeil's been playing center field. I don't know how much
yeah,
you've seen that, but like he's been
yeah,
sneaky decent in center field. So the worst case scenario is Robert's your platoon, your weak side platoon center fielder. Best case scenario is he's your everyday center fielder, even if it means he hits 5 against lefties and then slides down to their 8 or 9 hole against righties. There's a deep lineup there. If Luis Robert's your
right,
8 hitter in the playoffs against righties, like I'm not mad about that personally. You can take that risk,
exactly.
right?
And I think a lot of the struggles that Luis Robert has been having the past couple of years is because there's not a lot of protection around him. And we've seen him perform better the last couple weeks. I think since June 6th, he's got like a 125 WRC plus, something like that, which
Yeah.
is great for the type of the streak that he was on at the beginning of the year. It was not looking good. But if some team thinks that, all right, he's going to be their everyday center fielder and he's in a lineup with good protection around him, I think that team walks away at the end of the day feeling like, all right, yeah, we got what we wanted, and he's a productive piece for them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So when you look at each of these systems, for me, right, the Phillies, Andrew Painter is not happening. Aiden Miller,
Yeah,
I don't think is happening for Luis
no
Robert at this
chance.
point where it's at. Even Eduardo Tait, probably not happening. I don't think it would make sense for the White Sox. Anyways, you don't need to add another
No,
catcher into the system right now. Arun Escobar is the one I'm circling and sending into the Phillies. I would love an Arun Escobar for those who are not familiar. Obviously, we Dylan and I are a little bit more prospect nerded out than the average
yeah,
person, so I should give some
just
context
a
here.
bit.
Just a bit. Arun Escobar is a 20-year-old international signing out of the Dominican Republic, I believe, or Venezuela. Pardon me. He played in
Yeah,
the DSL. Venezuelan signing was a mid-level signing, not a high-end international signing, but absolutely dominated the Florida Complex League
yeah,
last year. It's funny because the DSL numbers are just so misleading. He had a pretty mediocre start to his career in the Dominican League, but then
right.
comes over to rookie ball last year. 976 OPS in rookie ball last season, really just tore it up. Very good approach last year, barely struck out at all. Flashed some power here and there, but then this year, in single A, he really just entered that top 100 prospect category this season, which it still might be a reach, honestly, at this point for Luis Robert, but that would be my target guy. 20 years old, up in high A now. Second base profile, could maybe play some third, but probably more of a second baseman. I think it's a somewhat comparable to like a Herrera Perez, but I do like his profile overall a little bit better than Herrera. That would be the target guy. If it's not Arun Escobar, where are you pivoting in the Philly system?
I mean, the Phillies have a lot of good pitching, and the White Sox draft was a ton of bats, and if there's been like a lot of deals, especially recently, where teams aren't willing to give up their top of the line position player prospects.
Sure.
And if that means that a team is offering either a B tier position player prospect or an A tier pitching player prospect,
I don't think you're getting any A tiers for
I know
Luis at
I
this
know
point, but yeah.
I'm not saying it. Say it's like C tier position player, B tier pitcher. I would be shocked if the White Sox don't take that B tier pitcher and just
Yeah, I hear
hope
you.
that he can just turn into something good down the line. Whereas the C tier position player, it's probably not anything more than organizational depth.
Yeah, no, I hear you for sure. That's why like a Moises Chase could make
Yeah,
sense. He got hurt, but was having a really good start to the season in Double A. 22-year-old right-hander for the Phillies organization. But I also think they got some interesting bats there. Like a Gabriel Rincones is a guy who
yeah,
yeah, you're not thrilled about that being your headline, but if it's paired with another prospect, right? If it's a Rincones and then more of like a projectable arm to throw in there, a younger level arm maybe. Rincones could be in the White Sox outfield next season, and it's not a super exciting profile, but it's at least a fourth outfielder probably at the big league level. There's a couple other guys in that system that could make sense. When you look at the Mets, another similar situation where like a lot of their talent is more on the pitching side, where I could see it on the hitting side. I heard that a Drew Gilbert or Ryan Clifford are two options there. Two guys that were traded into the Mets organization, or Clifford was they were both Astros guys. They came over in the Verlander trade to the team
yeah.
there. So I think Drew Gilbert is someone I've heard mentioned a couple times. He's having a decent season in AAA. He was it's been pretty good. It hasn't been again not super exciting, but when you look at this deal, it's probably going to be one of those AAA guys who has some projectability, or a young unproven guy with some excitement but a long way to go. So that's probably the route it ends up being. I think Gilbert's the one that I've heard the most as an option there. I could see the Sox just taking like a longer term guy with like a Jesus Baez, who's a 20-year-old infielder in the Mets system, more of an international guy. You could go with like a Ronnie Mauricio potentially. Adrian's mentioned that as well.
Right.
Ronnie Mauricio is a guy who's been up. He's shown to be a big league player. I don't know where he fits into the White Sox like infield situation, but I do think there's at least options in both of these systems that would make some sense for Robert.
Yeah, I'm gonna give one like deeper shout name
Let's hear it.
in that Met system. Jacob Reimer in
He's too
Double
good,
A.
man. He's too
Yeah,
good.
I'm
I think he's
praying
too good.
because Yeah, he's the Mets' 17th ranked prospect right now. Across 2 levels this year, has
Come on,
an
Dylan. Why are we looking at pipeline, man? Come on.
I'm just pulling up the players. All right. But yeah,
That's
across
good.
2 levels in high A and double A, he's got an 865 OPS, 11 stolen bases, uh, 37 walks to 80 strikeouts, and only has 4 homers. Or sorry, has 12 homers on the year, 4 triples. But if they want to give him up, I'm all for it. But I think that the Mets are going to trade one of their blocked infielders, whether that
For
be
sure.
Mauricio, Beatty, maybe a Luis Angel Acuna. I doubt that Acuna gets moved, but I could see just Luis Robert for Brett Beatty getting offered or getting asked
Yeah.
for by the White Sox.
Yeah, somebody mentioned Ilian Pena as well here in the Mets. I would love that, but I don't see it
Love
happening.
it. Yeah.
Pretty
No chance.
pretty hard to imagine a $5 million international signing who's
Yeah.
17
He
years
was their
old
top guy
getting
last
traded.
year. So
Their top guy, also like the second top. I don't know if you know, the second top paid guy behind Sasaki in the entire international class
boy.
last year. So I
Jesus.
doubt it. I think that's pretty unlikely. Beatty, I don't think so. The way he's playing lately, I think if he gets moved,
Yeah.
it's in a bigger deal probably. So I don't see that happening. But a lot of options there with the Mets, actually, more than I maybe thought at first look of how that would go. But I do think that one of those two teams is the option for Robert. There's a Giants we mentioned as a possibility. There's a
Yeah.
couple other teams that could swing it maybe, but really the two teams that it's just a clear fit of they need a center fielder, they can afford a little bit of risk, they have some pieces to trade. I think it's one of those two. And no, to answer the question in the chat, you can't trade drafted guys at this point. It has to be waited until the offseason.
Yeah, but they can be player to be named laters in a trade.
Technically,
So
but it's pretty hard to pull those off.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
uncommon.
doubt
at the
it'll
deadline.
happen.
Yeah. Moving on to our next asset here, we can talk about them in tangent too, because I think the two other pieces that are rentals, but are actually going to get, actually Tauchman's not technically a rental. Mike
Right.
Tauchman and Adrian Hauser are both going to get a legit return here, which is pretty great, and honestly some good moves by Chris Getz. Tip of the cap there.
Yeah.
Two guys that you brought in on pretty minimal deals that are going to be moved for legit pieces, and they both will have a lot of suitors. Starting with Tauchman, who do you see as the clear fits for Mike Tauchman potentially?
I think the Houston Astros could absolutely use and would love a Mike Tauchman in that lineup. I was looking at their lineup a couple days ago. How is that team in first place? Like
It makes no sense.
I don't understand.
I mean, Jordan's been hurt all year. Pena's on the
Exactly.
IL now. They've been without Luis Garcia and Christian Javier all season. Lance McCullers is, who knows?
Right.
They're just like the Astros they're something else, man. They develop and find ways to win.
Ridiculous.
And consistently every year, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, so I think the Astros are one. We mentioned Philly for Luis Robert. I could see them for Mike Tauchman too, and San Diego I think is the clear fit for a Mike Tauchman because, like you said, they have Gavin Sheets in the outfield right now. I'm sure they would love to replace him with a Mike Tauchman. So we're going to talk about a little bit of a package deal later on. I don't know. We can talk about it now.
We can just jump into it. I think I said this to you before recording, and I think the most perfect trade ever for a Padres team that is not at the they aren't playing well enough to really go all in this season,
right.
But they're also not a team that's going to sell. They're still very set up for the next couple seasons. Mike Tauchman and Corey Lee. I just think it's like the most perfect package for the Padres. Yeah. They need a catching. They need catching help like desperately, and they haven't been able to plug left field all season. The two things they need to add are an affordable left fielder and a catcher. Corey Lee probably is their starting catcher like tomorrow, which is crazy to say considering he can't even crack the White Sox roster right now. But like he could legit start for the Padres, and then Mike Tauchman would be their left fielder for the rest of the season. Mike Tauchman would instantly be a huge upgrade over whoever they've been running out in left field. Obviously, you'd rather have Sheets playing DH more and then Tauchman in left field more compared to the other options they have there that are pretty minimal. So the Tauchman to San Diego fit, in my opinion, is just a perfect fit.
Would you like to guess? Would you like to guess who the Padres starting catcher is right now?
I honestly genuinely could not tell you. It's either Campusano, who I think is in AAA right now.
Nope.
And then who are even the other guys on that roster?
It's
gotta be
this catching room is awesome.
Diaz or it's Maldonado still.
It is Martin Maldonado. Their catching room is Martin Maldonado and Elias Diaz.
Corey Lee
could start tomorrow, like you said.
Yeah, they should make this trade like today. I
Yeah,
think the Padres, the Tauchman trade makes a lot of sense. I also think the Astros make a lot of sense for Tauchman. Like you said, I think
yeah,
those are the two best fits. Philly, that could be an option if they miss out on a Durant, if they miss out on a Robert, right? But I do think they'd rather have a little bit more of a defensive center fielder focused guy, right? And Tauchman's played some center, but I don't think you want a 35-year-old
no,
netting
no.
center for you in the playoffs, right?
His speed has absolutely cratered this year. It's like in
Yeah,
that
it has.
eighth
Yeah,
percentile. So,
right.
but I genuinely don't think that Boston moves any of their outfielders. So I think that Philly could be a fit because of the lack of left-handed outfielders on the market right now. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that there's a lot of outfielders
Yeah.
that the White Sox have that the Phillies could use. We're going to talk about Michael A. Taylor and Austin Slater here in a minute. I would not shock me if the Phillies get one of those guys either.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think the Phillies could be a fit for a lot of different players from the White Sox,
Yeah,
honestly. But I do see San Diego and Houston as the two very obvious Mike Tauchman fits, where they don't have the best systems. They're not going to be huge guys. I think for like the tricky thing with the Padres is their system is very pitching heavy right now. Beyond their
yeah,
top two, obviously DeVries, Salas not in the play here. Beyond that, it's definitely pitching heavy. I if the Sox could pull off like a Braden Net, even if you're going to go pitching, who has been kind of one of their
yep,
breakout guys this season in Double A, that'd be amazing. If you want to go the hitting route, I would definitely take a flyer on like a Cobb Hightower, who was a third
yeah,
round pick last year. A guy who's struggled to start his professional career, but a third round pick of the high school last year, and is someone who still has a lot to like there in terms of the hit tool and just an overall athlete there. Kavaris Tears is another one I should mention, who I think has been okay this year in Single A, but was a fourth round pick out of Tennessee last season. So I think that the Padres, if you can get a solid piece like one of those names I mentioned there for a Tauchman, I'm very content with that.
yeah. And I think that if the return for Talkman will be better if you package him with Hauser, Corey
Or Relief
Lee,
Farm or
and
Corey Lee. Yeah.
exactly,
There's so many
exactly,
options there. I do think we're going to see a number of like two tandem packages here from
right,
the White Sox because aside from Robert, right, any of these players, Tauchman, Hauser, Slater, Taylor, Lenny Sosa, potentially Corey Lee, like any of those players, a duo of like a team that needs two things. That's why the
right.
Padres make perfect sense to me. Same thing with the Astros too, because if you put Tauchman with Corey Lee for the Padres or Hauser for either of those teams could be great, right? So I think we're going to see some of those kind of two veteran packages dealt out to maximize the prospect return.
Yeah, and that's what the White Sox should do because if your options are
Yeah.
the 30th ranked player in a system, or you add on another veteran piece that won't be here past November at the
Yeah.
very latest, and then you get the team's 15th best player, like sure, why
Right.
not?
Are you familiar with Kevin Alvarez in the Houston system?
I'm not. No,
Not that you should be. This is
yeah, no,
how
I'm not that
I
much of
know
a
that I've.
sicko.
This is how I've gone a little too far deep in the prospect side of
Yeah.
things. 17-year-old international signing in the Dominican League for the
Oh
Astros.
yes, yes, I do know
He
him. I do
he's
know him.
sick, dude.
Yeah,
30 games, and again, DSL numbers are like fake, so I don't want to put too much stock in numbers, but 30 games in the DSL, he struck out 11 times
yeah,
and has a 906 OPS right now. He was a $2 million signing last year out of the Dominican Republic. Like, sure, honestly,
yeah.
like
Why
I'm
not?
fine with those flyers when you're playing with house money, like I said, with this type of situation. I think that whatever you can get in terms of upside is great. The Astro system in general is also a bit weaker, but moving on to Adrian Hauser, we can tie back into the Astro system here because I do think Adrian Hauser gets a sneaky return and actually
Yeah.
probably a better return than Tauchman in my opinion.
Yeah, I said like a couple of weeks ago I would be shocked if we got a system top 15 for Adrian Hauser, but like the way he's been pitching, I think we're gonna get a top 15, maybe even top 10 of a weaker farm. Like
Yeah, I agree.
the Astros don't really have that good of a farm, so I could very easily see them getting like a eighth or ninth ranked prospect for Adrian Hauser just because of how weak that farm is.
Yeah, 100%. I think that am I crazy to think that like the White Sox could pull like Jacob Melton for like Hauser and Tauchman? Like I would love
Ooh,
that. I'd be
okay,
all over that. I mean, that might be a
yeah,
little bit of a bold pick there. He's pretty consensus the second prospect in the Astros system
yeah,
pre-draft, obviously. I think that you could justify for the Astros, trading a Jacob Melton who doesn't really fit into their long term outfield with the idea of a guy who can be your back end starter in Adrian Hauser and a guy who can start in left field and allow Jordan Alvarez to be your full time DH when he comes back, and in Mike Tauchman, right? So I think that's possible. It's funny to think of trading two vets for one singular prospect,
Right. Yeah.
but if it's a borderline top 100 guy like Jacob Melton and a guy who could start in the White Sox outfield literally today, I'm kind of here for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a little bit of love to a pitcher in the
Yeah,
Astro
I'm
system,
curious who you got here.
Miguel
Yeah,
Ulola. I don't know
he's
how to
good.
pronounce his name.
He's gross.
Ullola. I think that he should be up in the Astros rotation like today. Like he is
Yeah, they don't
very
have room.
very easily the best pitching prospect in the system. In AAA right now, he's got a 3.5 ERA across 69 innings. I think he's hurt right now, which is a bit weird to see. But 89 strikeouts in those 69 innings. Has struggled with command, 50 walks in those 69 innings, but only 50 hits allowed. So, he's got
Yeah.
great stuff. And if the White Sox can figure out a way to get him and just hone in on the command, he could be a very good piece for the White Sox in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. Anderson Brito is another one there to shout in the Astros system. I think if you're looking at a Tauchman or a Hauser package, one of those two arms would be great. Brito is a 21-year-old pitcher, so a little bit more of an upside guy, a small kind of stature, just gets the job done guy. But at 21 years old in high A, he has a 3.28 ERA and has just been pretty consistently shoving throughout the season, even on a somewhat of a an innings. He hasn't thrown a ton of games so far. There's some guys. The Astros system again, it's a weak system, but even a top 10 guy like any of those guys we just mentioned in a weak system for a Hauser or a Tauchman, like these are the trades you make that help a rebuild be accelerated, and you got to nail some of these Tauchman deals, the Hauser deals. Like I've heard people floating the idea of keeping some of these veteran, like one or two of these vet guys to like try and have some veteran presence, and like Tauchman would be the one I would maybe consider just because
No,
he has a year of control next year. But no, you cash
there's
in,
there's
you get
always
one of
there's
these
always
guys.
going to be
But yeah,
veterans cycling in and out of the clubhouse,
yeah,
especially with a young team like the White Sox are.
yep,
There's going to be veterans signed in the offseason. It's not like the entire team next year is going to be
exactly.
rookies or guys in their second year. Like there's going to be guys brought in to help
Yep.
that veteran mentorship. And just because if Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teal and Edgar Carroll can't go 2 months without a veteran hounding over them, I don't even know what Mike Talkman exactly does.
And,
Everybody
and he's
makes it.
everybody loves him. Everybody
Yeah,
loves
no,
him,
he
and which
he
is
seems
great.
like a
But you can
great
you can
guy.
find those guys. You can
Yeah,
find
but
those guys, and yeah,
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 exactly. So if they can't go 2 months without him or another veteran leader being there, it's not going to work out for him because eventually those guys are going to need to make that step and be able to survive on their own without essentially a father figure in the clubhouse. So
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. You got to trade Tauchman and Hauser. Those are the two guys you're going to get legit asset back for.
yeah,
If you can get a Miguel Ololo, I don't know how to say that name, or Anderson
Uyola, maybe?
Brito, or any of those kind of quality pitching prospects that are in the top half of the Astros system, you make that deal immediately. Honestly, I think that especially a guy like Hauser who came out of nowhere and was signed in the
Right.
middle of off the streets for mid-season by the White Sox, and has been the best pitcher in the White Sox roster, honestly, which is
Yeah.
crazy. But like, you're going to get a legit piece for him, and you got to make that deal. You got to cash in when you can. Moving on to some other guys, those are the only three that are like, that I see as legit assets. Everybody else in this list, I think, is a tack on, right? If you can get a
Right.
singular flyer for them, cool. But realistically, you get just you tack on a Taylor or a Slater with an arm, or you tack on a bullpen arm with a Mike Tauchman or with a Luis Robert, right, to just add a little extra juice in there. Starting with Michael A. Taylor, Austin Slater, those innings should be Brooks Baldwin, etc., whoever else you
Right.
want to fill the outfield with. Like you don't need those guys getting innings anymore. Even if it's Will Robertson, whatever, like sure, like those innings don't need to go to those two anymore. Who do you see just quickly as the potential fits for a Slater, for a Taylor?
For Slater, I have the Padres written down. Their outfield room is awful against left-handed pitching, just because they have two lefties in there with Gavin
Yeah,
Sheets and Jackson Merrill. So he could very easily slot in as the platoon with Gavin Sheets in left
yep,
field. Like I said,
instantly.
Gavin Sheets shouldn't be in left field. And
Also,
then
shouldn't be
Michael
playing
A.
against lefties,
That too. That
right?
also true. Michael A. Taylor to the San Francisco Giants makes a lot of sense. He's been playing more corner outfield than he has in years past. So
Yeah,
if they want to get a good defender to play that cavernous outfield in San Francisco, he makes a lot of sense for them. And they seem to be going all in this year. I'm not saying that they're even going to make the playoffs, but like they seem to be buying this year, and he could very easily be a good piece for that lineup to add.
yeah, definitely. I think you're right. I think again, those guys are throw-ins, right? You're probably not doing an individual trade for a Taylor or a Slater. Maybe someone gives you like a complex league flyer or just a
Right.
AAA kind of not working out type of guy for a Taylor or a Slater. But like ultimately, I think if you can tack one of those guys onto either a Hauser or with a bullpen arm, then you're actually going to get a little bit of something. Lenine Sosa, we floated the idea.
Maybe.
I'm kind of in on trading him, to be
I
honest,
am too.
because I think you've seen more than you were, you've seen more from Lean Sosa overall this year than you had so far in his career. And that's a good thing, of course. It's good to see him kind of taking a step forward. But at this point, he's already entering arbitration, as crazy as that sounds,
Yeah,
soon enough
that's
here.
ridiculous.
And the White Sox have a situation where like the infield is kind of getting a little bit deeper,
Right.
and there's some options there, right? You've got Miguel Vargas, you've got Chase Mydats, you've got Colson Montgomery. We talked a little Brian Ramos earlier. You've got a number of guys who are going to get some innings there, and Sosa, if you can get an asset for him, I'm very open to the idea of trading him, even though I'm not sure where the fits are because there's not a ton of need for non shortstop infield among contenders.
Yeah, Adrian
Yankees
just
do,
said
Jeff.
it in the chat.
That's a good shout. Yep.
Yankees are the team that I have on my radar for Lenyn Sosa because they just DFA'd DJ LeMahieu a couple weeks ago. I think it's Oswald Peraza is their starting third baseman now. It's some guy who shouldn't be playing every day at third base for the New York Yankees.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah. So, if they think that Lenyn Sosa would be a good fit for their team, I'm all for it because then, my draw slides back over to second, Colson Montgomery slides to short, and then you have seemingly your infield of 2026 locked up because then you maybe go out and sign a third baseman, a first baseman, and Miguel Vargas slides into whichever position is open. But then you got Montgomery and Mydroth up the middle. And I feel like those are their natural positions. Granted, they both can play. They can shift left one spot and play either third or short. But I feel like
Right.
that's the organization. That's what the organization wants their positions to be: is Montgomery at short, Mydroth at second.
Yeah, I think so, but I don't know, man. I see a lot of the intrigue of having Colson at third, and I think that you've seen
Yeah,
some really good times from him so far. But yeah, I think the Yankees are the fit for Sosa if they move him. I don't think they move him. I actually like that shout here from Jamie in the chat too, as a Rays shout. I think that's a type of bat the Rays could add as just a
yeah,
depth guy, a guy who can kind of be a rotational infielder for them and just fill a couple holes, play a game at second one day, play a game at third one day, just kind of be the kind of rotating guy there for the Rays, which I could see that as well. But I do think the Yankees are probably the best fit there. With that said, I think the Yankees would rather pay up a little bit more for an Arenado or even for Brian Hayes, who's a little bit less. Obviously, they want Suarez. Everybody wants Suarez. Every single team in the league wants Eugenio Suarez at this point, it seems like.
Yep.
But I think that Sosa's at least one to consider. But I'm not like expecting him to get traded, I wouldn't say. But I do think, he'll be. He should get traded. I think.
Yeah.
I think he should. I don't know if he does though.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of like the in between where if he gets traded, I'm not surprised, but if he doesn't get traded, I'm also not surprised. But I would honestly like to see a move for him from the White Sox trading Sosa. But yeah, I don't think that the Yankees fans would be very happy.
Yeah, comment in the chat here saying Yankees fans would be unhappy with Sosa. Yankees fans would be very upset, I think.
No, once they see him chase a slider that's halfway in the left-handed batter's box, they're going to be calling for a DFA. But yeah, if they end up trading Sosa, I think that they're going to get at least something of value. But if they end up keeping him, it would not shock me either.
Yeah. Bullpen arms, real quick. I don't think we need to talk Aaron Zavala. I think if he gets moved, it's just a throw into another deal.
Yeah.
Bullpen arms, though, I think the three that are the most likely is going to be a Steven Wilson, a Dan Altavia, and a Brandon Eisert. I think is that fair to say? I think that's where we're at. Yeah. I don't think you move a Mike Vassell. I think you hold Mike Vassell. He's been great. Jordan Leisure is really turning a corner. I'm happy to see him kind of finding his groove. I think Leisure and Vassell will be part of next year's bullpen. Obviously, Grant Taylor's not going anywhere, of course.
Right.
I think Wilson, Altavia, and Eisert are the three that are most likely to get moved. Wilson, I also could see staying, given that he's got a lot of control still at this point, and he has been very solid.
Yeah, and I don't think that Tyler Gilbert or Cam Boozer get moved just because you gave up something for him to get them in the offseason. So
Gilbert's been solid, actually.
Yeah, Gilbert has actually been really solid lately.
Yeah.
But like those guys, they still have control left. And I don't think that you're getting a lot more in return than what you gave up for him with Boozer, especially not just because of how bad he's been. And you gave up a DSL All-Star in Yoiker Fajardo for him. But you never know. Some team could want a lefty specialist out of the bullpen for a couple years, and one of them might get moved. But I think Isert, Altavilla, and Steven Wilson are like the highest chances of getting moved. But, if another guy got traded, it would not shock me at all. If Tyler Alexander gets moved, he was really good today. I was surprised to see him strike out.
I actually think Alexander could be a sneaky target to add into either Hauser or Robert or Tauchman, kind of package with one of those guys as a fun kind of funky reliever that I do think a team could get some early innings out of probably.
Yeah, so if there's another bullpen arm or two that get moved that isn't Mike Vassell or Grant Taylor, I think I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
Yeah, no reason to talk further on where bullpen arms will go. For people who aren't that familiar with the deadline, like every single contender will add a reliever from somewhere.
Yeah, at least
they add, what they pay for. You never know.
It's about time though. It's about time that the White Sox get a complex league phenom, and he just turns around and becomes a stud. Like,
that would be fun, man. Aldrin Batista for sure, but
hey, that's very true. But like, I want like a relief pitcher being sent out for some 16-year-old kid in the Dominican right now, and he ends up being the White Sox best player in 2032. So,
I'm with you. It'll happen. It'll happen one of these days. Sounds like we just missed a Birmingham walk-off. Good to see in Birmingham.
Oh, did they?
And you know what that inning started with in Birmingham in the 9th inning?
A Sam Antonacci walk.
Sam Antonacci walked.
Yes, I knew it.
I mean, come on, that's classic. It's too classic. It was four pitch walk. That's hilarious. So that's where we're at with that. The last thing to mention briefly here, because I want to wrap here soon. Thank you for everybody for hanging out. We got some great viewership today and some awesome action in the comments. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us and talking some White Sox trade deadline. Obviously, we'll have a ton of trade deadline content next week. We'll definitely hop on a pod. I think probably the night of the deadline, or maybe either the night of or the day after. We'll definitely get on a pod and break it all down for everybody for sure. The last guy to mention. Do you think a Davis Martin trade is possible? It makes it tough that he just got off the IL today.
Yeah.
Do you see a team taking a flyer, and would you be okay with moving Martin given the other pitching that is throughout the system and the team right now?
Would I be okay with moving Martin? Yes. Do I think they move Martin? No.
Yeah,
I think that if he hadn't gotten hurt, I think that there would have been a little bit of a higher chance that he got traded. Yeah. But I think that, since he got hurt, I don't want to say his value cratered or anything, but, he was on a streak of like 6 straight starts with 6+ innings pitched. So he was going on a streak to be, one of the better arms that could have been available at the deadline. The forearm strain just sucked and it killed his value. But, if some team like the Boston Red Sox, who is very pitching needy right now, if they want to give up a Jonathan Garcia, the password, sign me up. I don't think that I don't think that he's available though for Davis Martin.
Hingston for
Hingston. That's the first time
I had to learn that one because we just did a JB video on him recently. So, but the password is a sick nickname.
Yeah.
So
that's
but
awesome.
I'm game for that. I think Martin, a move for him would make a lot of sense, but ultimately I don't think it happens. I think the injury combined with the fact that the White Sox still have a lot of pitchers coming off TJ, I think that, Martin hasn't been necessarily his best, right? I do think that there is kind of this unlikely scenario that he gets moved, but if he does and you can get a legit prospect for him, and I'm okay with that. I'm open to it for sure. I want to answer one more question here from Kevin in the chat. He asked if there's a dark horse from the White Sox team that gets moved. I think we mostly covered anybody. You got anybody else you think could get moved?
Andrew Benintendi. I think that there is a small chance. It's not a big chance, but there is a very outside possibility that some team sees what he's been doing this year, which is sort of hitting the ball, and wants to take on that contract because, as we get farther and farther removed from the signing, that contract doesn't look too bad. There's not a lot of money that is still left to be paid. I think it's this year and next year. We signed him in after 21. So it's 22. Or I don't know. Regardless, there's less money that has to be paid now than there was a year or two ago. So, if some team wants to take on Benintendi's contract and give up a,
Yeah.
like I said, a 16-year-old guy playing in the Dominican right now, I'm all for it. I don't think it
Yeah.
happens, but
Yeah, it's another year. His scales down the last season, so it's 17 million in 2026 and 15 million in 2027. So, possible. I think that's
maybe.
definitely a possible situation. They would definitely have to eat a little bit of money as well in that. Probably, this might sound a little crazy. Any universe, the White Sox trade Shane Smith?
That's exactly where I thought you were going, and I
I don't
think there,
think so.
I
But
think
like
that there, I think that there is, but it is not this one. I think that there is there's like a
an
2%
alternate
chance.
universe, yeah,
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 like
that's
yeah,
fair. That's fair.
in the alternate universe where Shane Smith is, balling out of his mind, and the White Sox
Yeah,
are getting like 4 top 100 prospects for him. Sure, trade him, but it's not this one. There's like a 2% chance that he gets moved in my mind. I think that they just want to continue his development, and you got him for free in the Rule 5 draft from
yeah,
Milwaukee. I think you just take that and let him
yeah.
develop, because we're barely scratching the surface of what Shane Smith can become. But I could also see them cashing in on that hot start that he had, that all-star first half, and just
Yeah.
saying, we just got a boatload of prospects for a Rule 5 pick.
Yeah, I think a little part of me wants to see it. I do think there is a world where it happens.
Yeah,
No, to answer the comment, I don't see Miguel Vargas getting moved. I think that
not
one's
a
less
chance.
likely than Shane Smith, in my
Not a
opinion.
chance.
I don't think Smith goes either. I'm just throwing it
No.
out there as you never know. We'll see what happens. One more question to answer. Both Thorpe and Mason Adams had TJ right at the beginning of the season, right at the end of spring training.
Yeah.
So those guys will be back next year, but it won't be out of the gate. I think they'll have to build up, right? So I would expect a Thorpe and an Adams to be in the rotation possibly come June next year, more likely
Right.
than at the beginning of the year. So you're going to need to open the year with 5 starters that don't include those two.
Yeah. So, if those guys do end up coming back in May, June, whatever, there's going to be some veteran signings, like this year with Martin Perez, Bryce Wilson, the 2 months that he was here. I think we could see another Adrian Hauser pick up off the street after a minor league opt out. So I don't know. It's
Yeah.
the rotation next year has a lot of possibilities, but I think that the 3 that are penciled in right now are Jonathan Cannon, Sean Burke, and Shane Smith. Davis Martin
Yeah.
could be traded in the offseason. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. We'll see what happens. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out. Obviously, we'll have you covered next week with the deadline. It's going to be, I think, it's one last question just to answer here. A king's ransom for Mike Vassell, I think you take.
Sure. Yeah.
Nobody's sending a king's ransom for a reliever,
Right.
An early reliever, no matter how good he's been. He has been great, but anyways, we will keep you guys updated. We'll talk next week. This has been a long one. Again, thank you to everybody for hanging out. This has been a super active chat tonight. Maybe the post White Sox game strat will be our new time zone. If people like that, let us know. Respond on
Yeah.
Twitter for sure. If you prefer a little bit of a later night pod where it's after the game's over, I'm definitely down to do that because it's only 7:30 my time. So for you, it's a little bit later, but
It's
I'm
9:30.
100% down for the late night, the later evening pods. I always enjoy doing that sometimes actually. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week on the FutureSox RoundUp. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Dylan. Have a good one.